All right, guys. So this is the QA section. Apologize to the guys I watched it online. Apparently they updated some stuff and I had to turn that back on. I couldn't do it during the live update. So anybody have any questions about Tekin speed controllers, settings, gearing, anything? I answered a lot of it.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. So as far as are you going to cover timing and turbo and things like that?
I can go over that. So I mean, yeah, there's questions.
I'd love to hear. Most of us here run mod, so I'd like to know when turbo is appropriate, not appropriate, when you should go more of a timing mechanical or.
Okay, so that's a question. So okay, so the question really is the timing settings. How do you use them? When do you use them? Which ones are better in other situations? So we're at a 10 scale indoor off-road track. So typically at a mod track like this, I don't ever really use turbo in off-road. And let me explain why I don't do that. The reason why I don't do that typically is because it's inconsistent. The turbo is based off of time. How much time you spent at wide open throttle is what actually tells the turbo to come on. And yes, you can turn it down to like basically 0.1 seconds, which obviously is now. That's instantaneous. What I don't personally like about turbo at that setting is basically any time you hit wide open throttle, turbo's coming on. Well, that can get kind of squirrely sometimes. So if you just mash it, the turbo's on, you know, your car can be kind of hard to drive. So me personally, I never use turbo in off-road. I've really never found a setting or a track or an instance where I needed just more top speed, which is really what turbo is designed for. It's for the straightaway. It's for, you know, the rest of the settings are really for the infield, but if you need a lot more speed on the straightaway, that's what turbo is designed for. Which is why the on-road guys love that stuff, because on on-road, they need to really have a smooth car on the on-road. They're on the edge all the entire time, but then the straightaway can be 250 feet, for example. The Tamiya track's got a huge straightaway. One of the tracks in Florida where the World's Resist held, the Kissimmee track, those touring cars were hitting upwards of 80 miles an hour. 80 miles an hour. And all that was because they were running a 4.5 turn motor with some turbo and boost in it. That's insane, guys. An 80 mile an hour 10 scale touring car on rubber tires, that's hauling the mail. So typically in off-road, let's say I run a 2-wheel drive buggy and I've got an 8.5. An 8.5 in like just blinking mode is probably pretty good for most layouts, but like this one for particular, it's got a nice little chicane getting onto the sweeper. And if your car's set up for it, you can really haul ass through that. So you can run some boost. So I would typically run maybe timing profile 3, which is 20 degrees of boost. And understand that every time you add more boost, you really need to start dropping your gear in that. So I kind of use a general rule of thumb is for every timing setting I go up, and let's say I go from profile 2 to profile 3, drop at least 1 pinion. The other thing to take into the equation is motor timing. I typically turn my motor timing down in modified because that gives me more torque on the bottom end. And then I use the speed controller settings to control the rest of it, mid-range, top end. And the speed controller timing is a little bit more effective and more efficient than just raw motor mechanical timing. You really got to kind of find that balance. So it's like, for example, in my short course truck, if I run an 8.5, and you guys, some of you guys have seen my short course truck, it's not slow with an 8.5. But because they typically wheelie a whole lot, I turn the motor timing down and just let the whole thing just spool up slowly. But once it's going, then I add boost. And that's really where the mid-range and the top end comes from. That's really always been my problem with some of the short course stuff, especially two-wheel drives that wheelies all the time if you've got too much motor. So if you're on a 7.5, you can't turn it when the wheel's in the air. You can't really control it a whole bunch. And if it's on the tail, it's hard to accelerate that way when the whole front end's just catching air. It just parachutes. So boost is one of those things where you can make a 17.5 run nearly as fast as a 10.5 or even a 9.5. I could put my 17.5 on the track right now, crank the boost up, and I'd probably motor everyone down the straightaway with it. And it's a 17.5. What's nice about that is if you have a track that doesn't have a lot of grip, luckily you guys have it, but let's say you didn't. No one's going to get around the track with a 7.5 at speed. There's no traction. So you can take a slower motor like a 10.5 or 17.5 or 13.5, have it not be so rippy as far as tire snap goes, but still get the speed out of it you need by adding a little bit of boost. That's kind of the cool part about boost. You can take a motor that really shouldn't go that fast, and you can make it go really fast. So I see a lot of guys at tracks I go to that are trying to run the motors the pro guys run, and they're not able to get around the track very well or very consistently because it's just too much motor for them. I'm not Ryan Mayfield. I'm not going to run a 5.5 turn in my 4-wheel drive buggy. I can, but I'll be faster lap times with a 6.5. That's just because I'm not Ryan Mayfield. I don't drive that way. I don't drive that much. So your car setups are the same way. If you don't drive like that particular pro driver, that pro setup probably won't work for you. It might get you close, but that might not be the setup for you. And I see a lot of guys make that mistake. If you're new to this hobby or you don't have that kind of car control, don't try to run the motors that the pro guys are running. You're going to end up breaking your car. You're going to get frustrated, and your lap times are going to prove it. He's so happy because he knows I'm right. And it happens. I mean, you've seen it too. Oh, I got a 4.5 turn in my 4-wheel. Dude, this isn't AstroTurf. This is not how that works. This is not a 10,000 square foot European track. We don't have room for 4 or 5. But because Lee Martin ran it or whatever, then they think it's okay. That's not how that works. So, any more questions? Shoot.
What's making the power on the turbo? Adding timing or something else?
It's adding timing. Yeah, you're 100% correct. So on a Tekin speed controller, you've got a couple of adjustments. You've got turbo delay, which is how much time at wide open throttle it takes before turbo comes in, which is nice because let's say this track was 40 feet longer than it was now, and you got that chicane section. And you can't quite hit open, full throttle through that chicane, but once you apex that last chicane corner, you can rip on it. What you don't want to do is have a lot of tire spin. That'll upset the car. So if I have that delay built in to where the car's settled and it's already going, now I can handle the extra power. That's what the delay's for. I'm looking for that kind of time, and you can see why that could be sometimes inconsistent, because if I'm going through their traffic and I miss that mark where I'm hitting full throttle when I'm by myself, but if I go through traffic and I have to lift, for example, now my turbo comes on 30 feet from where I'm used to it. That's why I don't personally use it, because it's inconsistent. And off-road we have traffic. The on-road guys, they have traffic, but it's nowhere near as upsetting to the cars as it is for us. They have a lot more grip than we do typically in on-road. And it does add timing. You get the amount of timing boost, your turbo boost you can get to it. You can also control how fast it comes in, how aggressive it is. And that's ramp rate. The ramp rate 1's pretty mild. That'd be okay in off-road. Ramp rate 2 and ramp rate 3, you've really got to have a lot of grip to hang on to that. I mean, because at ramp rate 3, it's hundredths of a second before full boost is on for turbo. And you can even see the on-road guys sometimes, if they have it cranked, you'll see their car going down the straightaway, and you'll see the turbo come on, and the car just slides over about 6 inches. And that's because they had wheel spin. The car literally just whoop, and grabs second gear scratch, whatever you want to refer to it as, and the car got upset. Imagine doing that in your 4-wheel drive car or your 2-wheel drive car. That car snaps over on the straightaway, you're looping, and you're now a bump on the straightaway. You're going to get hit.
If you have 25 degree timing and you're already ramped up to 25 degree timing, the turbo is adding more timing on that.
Correct. So if I have 20 degrees of boost, I have that based off RPM, and then turbo's on top of that, plus motor timing, which is always on. So motor timing is always engaged. It's a mechanical setting that's always on. Whatever your motor timing is set to, that's set. Then your turbo's on top of that. So let's say you've got 20 degrees of motor timing, 20 degrees of boost, and 10 degrees of turbo. That's 50 degrees of total timing. That's a lot. In theory, anything over 60 degrees can cause a motor to run backwards. Now, obviously, that has to be engaged at that time. You've got to be hitting those RPMs. You've got to have that much wide open throttle, how much times have to have passed, and your motor timing's got cranked up. So let's say, for example, let's say you take a 17.5 and it's got 50 degrees, and some guy tries to put 50 degrees of boost on it, it's going to blow it up. That's 100 degrees of timing. That's going to be hard to explain without a picture. So you've got 3 phases of a motor, right? A, B, and C. There's 120 degrees of rotation between each phase. 2 poles, you're going to divide that by 2. 120 divided by 2 is 60. If I go anything over that, when the speedo tries to fire, let's say the A phase, and it's advancing timing, it's just like a gas engine. If I miss that cylinder at top dead center, it's going to ping. We do that in electronics, and if it starts pinging, bad stuff happens. Motors melt down, speedo noodles pop, batteries explode. It's a bad day. And you can now you can understand too why we don't let the 4-wheel short course have that. Can you imagine boosting a Pro 4? That's just the battery's not going to handle that, guys. I mean, it would handle it once. It would do it one time. And we've seen guys try to do that stuff. I mean, you're literally taking a 1.5 turn motor and then trying to add boost to it. No, the battery's already. You guys know the 4-wheel short course. They go through batteries to begin with, let alone. To give you an idea, on a 4-wheel short course at any given time, with the grip you guys have, it can grab 100 amps. 100 amps will start every car in that parking lot, even the diesel. That's 100 amps out of this little tiny battery. We're asking for that repeatedly. Yeah, it's going to work that battery pretty hard. And if you boosted it, you're going to add even more amp draw. To give you an idea, a 17.5 in spec mode might draw 15 to 20 amps. If I boost that motor, and basically take a 2,000 kV 17.5 and now spin it to 8,000 with boost, it's going to have about 60 amps. Same motor, all I did was boost it. That much more amp draw. But of course, you're taking a motor that regularly spins 2,000 RPMs per minute. Now it's going to spin 8,000. That's why boost is kind of cool, because I can get that 4-cylinder turbo feel out of a 17.5 when I have tire control. So if you're having a hard time getting around the track and you're spinning the tires up a whole bunch, turn your motor back. Try a different one. And if you're running a 7.5 and you can't get that around the track consistently without crashing and without wheeling or without spinning out on power, try a 10.5. It'll still have the same top speed once you put a little boost in it. It'll just be easier to drive. So, more questions?
I have questions. Are you going to cover radio settings versus ESC settings?
I can cover anything you guys want. So.
What I'm looking at is, like, a lot of people, let's say budget racing, have come in here and see everybody running an 8.5, 7.5. They don't want to go and buy a 10.5 and down the road they're going to buy an 8.5. Yeah. So when you do that, would you go into your radio and let's say you turn your in point down from 100% down to 80% to kind of bring it back? Okay, you can. So the question really is can I turn my motor down with just speedo settings or radio settings, and which one's better than the other? So let's say I've got an 8.5 and that's the motor that the customer's got, and he obviously can't afford to get another one or whatever the circumstances are. There's a couple ways you can do this. You can definitely take the speed controller and turn things down. There's settings like current limiter. Obviously, if you've got a bunch of boost and turbo and stuff, turn it off. You can take the motor mechanical timing and turn it down. You can use your EPAs on the radio to turn it down, which what that does is it just doesn't let it hit full throttle. Turning the EPAs down on the radio like that to control top power is kind of a band-aid in my opinion. You're basically using the wrong motor for the driver and the track. It'll work temporarily, but ideally you shouldn't do it. You're better off turning the current limiter up, turning the motor timing down, taking out any timing and boost in the speed controller, just take that out, and trying to soften the power delivery as much as you can. The other thing you can do is use an exponential setting or a Tekin speed controller, a custom throttle curve. So you can actually add a concave throttle curve and slow down the bottom end, but still let them get top speed. And you can adjust that in the hotwire. There's lots of ways to get there. I'm not a huge fan of using the motor, your transmitter EPAs to turn the power down. That's an on-the-fly type deal. It's like dual rate steering. That would be like that.
Yes.
Oh, shit.
It's a temporary fix. 100%.
So you're going to do mechanical first on the motor?
I'll always go mechanical first.
And you're going in curves.
And speedo settings, turning current limiter down. Because a lot of us obviously use the EPAs on their transmitter to turn your brakes down. That's fine because you're not really into the brakes as hard as you are on the throttle. So and really it's four-wheel drive short course things that are running with really absurd power. That's when you really just got to put the right motor in the car ultimately. But yes, you can do it. You just got to be careful because a lot of times if they start messing with that setting a lot, they'll just be all over the track and kind of be out of control with it. So it's kind of nice to take the speedo because then they can't mess with it after the fact. Does that make more sense? They don't accidentally turn the motor back up, or they don't spool it up, or turn the exponential around in EPAs, things of that nature. Shoot. Yeah, so 100 essentially is no current limiter. And as that number comes down, it's limiting it to more and more and more current limit. So, for example, at 100% it's off, but at 10% it's on 90%. So if you find yourself turning your current limiter down into the 30, 40, 50 range, you're definitely using the wrong motor. Yeah, wrong motor. I mean, you'll see guys doing that with 4.5 turns and 4-wheel buggy. They're just trying to soften it up. I mean, let's be honest. That's like taking the Hellcat, Dodge Hellcat, and trying to get it to drive on the ice. You can turn that motor down as much as you want. It's still a big-ass V8 with 700 horsepower. It's not going to go driving on the ice very well. It's just the wrong car. Any more questions? You look like you have a question. No? Cool.
Current limiter is that's not taking voltage, it's amperage.
It is. Current limit is basically it's kind of hard to explain overall. In theory, yes, we're reducing the amp the motor can grab. But what we're also doing is we're monitoring RPM, throttle position, and a couple other factors to essentially slow down the acceleration of the motor. We can't actually measure amp draw on the speed controller currently. You have to have a lot of extra stuff in there, and those components add a lot of resistance, so we don't do it. So we kind of have an algorithm that calculates amp draw, and we go off of that. Because ultimately, if you added all the components to measure amps, the resistance of that speed controller goes up a lot, and so it's not worth it performance-wise. We can calculate amp draw pretty well based off of load, voltage, things of that nature. And that's why the data logger is kind of cool. Like the other thing, for example, guys that are running lower quality battery packs. If you think your car's going soft in its heat or whatever, you can use a data log to actually see how good your battery pack is. So there's a phenomenon called ripple current. And so when you look at your data logger and you see your yellow battery voltage line, obviously you can see the voltage value. But if you see a lot of hash bouncing around, in other words, a lot of up, up, down, and it's very often, that's a sign of a battery that doesn't perform. So some of the, I won't necessarily name brands, but if you're spending $30 on a battery pack and you're trying to run that in your 4-wheel short course, I guarantee you that you've got a lot more hash than someone running like a Protec that's a 100C pack and it's an actual quality high-end racing battery. I can prove it to you. I can show you on a data log on how your battery's not performing. And we see that a lot in 8-scale. Those guys are, again, they're running 1-turn motors in 8-scale, 1.5-turn motors in 8-scale, and if that battery pack, well, my car goes soft at 7 minutes. Well, yeah, because your battery voltage is down here and mine's not. What do you mean? I'm like, dude, your battery pack is just soft at 6 minutes. It's junk. It's time to go. Because you got to understand something too, guys. LiPo batteries in general, they're only good for a couple hundred cycles. You won't probably hear a battery manufacturer necessarily bring that setting up. But if you charge your battery pack like 300 times, it's going to start degrading very quickly. Especially if you charge at high amperage. If you leave them charged. Everyone knows how to take care of the batteries. You got questions about that? Yeah, I see some guys. Okay, shoot.
Balance charging versus the regular charge.
Okay, this is just my personal opinion. Fair disclosure, okay? I don't necessarily have to balance charge batteries, but here's the kicker: it is 1,000% safer to balance charge a battery, and here's why. If you've got a 2-cell, everyone understands how a battery works, right? The 2-cell LiPo 2S. That is 2 LiPo batteries put together in a series. Okay. If one of those 2 cells is lower than the other, 99% of the chargers on the market will try to bring the high cell down to the low cell, and that's the balance charge. But if you're not balance charging, but all the charger can do is try to get to 8.4 volts. So if you've got a weak cell in your pack, it will hit that cell because they're together without a balance charge until that voltage comes up. That means you might overcharge the strong cell because the weak cell doesn't perform. If it does it enough, that's when you get smoke and fire. For safety reasons, I would recommend balance charging every single time, unless you're 100% sure that you have good batteries. That makes some sense? It's a safety thing. Because if you have a weak cell, again, it'll bring the good cell down to the low cell and then charge them up together. And again, higher quality batteries typically have better balance between the 2 cells. That's what you typically see. That's why they cost more. Some of the lower quality, cheaper stuff, soft casing or things like that, or stuff that's used for airplanes and helicopters or rock crawlers, where they're like 20C, you'll see a lot of variance between the 2 cells because it's resistance, just quality of the cell. Those are going to be sketchy if you undo them with the balance charger. So I charge personally at 10 amps for mod and 20 amps for stock with a balance charger. I don't see any reason personally to go over that. What I have found is the trick is to discharge and then charge right away. And what that does is it builds heat in the battery, lowers the resistance in the pack, and gives you more punch. Definitely don't need that in mod, so I'll charge all my mod batteries in the morning and just let them sit there because I have more than enough power in mod. But for stock racing, there's a huge difference. Everyone understands that on resistance and all that? Okay, the lower the resistance, the more punch the battery has. Go ahead. Okay, so neutral width is an important setting. Neutral width is literally the window of neutral signal we will accept from that transmitter. The lower your neutral width setting is, the narrower that window is. If you've got a really good radio, KO, Futaba, Airtronics, Spectrum, it's a higher end one, you can go to a narrow window, and that just gives you a little bit more connected feel to the car. It's more instantaneous. The dead band is less.
What do you want to explain what neutral width is? There's a lot of people that don't know.
Okay, so radio settings on a transmitter go from 1 millisecond pulse to 2 millisecond pulse. Neutral, let's assume that's just in dead center, 1.5 milliseconds. On a ready-to-run radio, you'll get some signal wander because of performance things. That signal might go 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, just kind of bounce around. If you run a neutral width setting that's really, really low, and you find you get those error codes where it doesn't turn on an arm, it's because your neutral width setting is low. On a high-end performance radio, there's little to no signal wander. You can run a lower setting. It's often confused with deadband or minimum drive, and those are 2 totally different settings. Neutral width really is just how much will I give you buffer-wise on your neutral signal. On an older, for example, the old M8s, they had a linkage setting on the trigger inside, and as that wore out, it would mechanically stick, and sometimes your neutral signal wouldn't be back where you calibrated it. You'd have to kind of wiggle or snap the trigger to get it to arm the speed controller. And that was just mechanical way. That's how they did it back then. The M11 still has the same linkage or similar linkage, and then the M12 they got rid of it finally. So it really depends. If you've got a bad potentiometer in your transmitter, and you can go to your signal and you can see it bounce around, send your radio in. That's why we're on. And that's something we see sometimes at big races where the guys they can't quite figure out why everything's so erratic. That's why, because the signal's wrong. If you think you have that going on, we'll grab the radio and we can try to figure that out for you. On a competition radio, neutral width 5 is usually pretty standard. I never recommend dropping it all the way down to nothing. That's usually a bad deal. On a ready-to-run radio, 20 or higher on a budget style radio, because 9 times out of 10, those are the ones that have more wander just because of pulling.
So neutral width the point between brakes or reverse and throttle. That's neutral width is.
Neutral width is the calibration point we'll accept from the transmitter.
Okay, so that's
we'll give you more.
Not giving it throttle or
correct.
It's neutral width. Right?
Yep. Yep.
So when the higher the rate, then you can adjust in the ESC. A cheaper radio generally needs a bigger.
Because of the signal wander. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when you turn your car on and it won't arm,
they're most likely it's either their calibration they move they bump their throttle trim, on a knob or the digital, or their neutral width, their signal's wandering and they just need to open up that accepted window. And you usually see this on especially the ready-to-run radios that have knobs.
Yeah.
Those are pretty bad. And that's why the stock setting is 25, because that way it pretty much accepts any radio we calibrate with. But if you're a good driver, if you've got high-end equipment, you can bring that down and feel more connected to the car. The other setting that I think kind of goes hand in hand with this is the minimum throttle and minimum brake. And we're really low on those defaults because our speed controllers go to anything from a competition car to a rock crawler. If I ran the minimum throttle setting I put in my cars, if I ran it in a rock crawler, it would break the transmission because of the way that works, because of their reduction. They're 200 to 1, and we're 2.6 to 1. And the way that setting is I personally have my cars race ready, set the car on the track, and as soon as I touch that trigger, and I know that I'm giving that trigger movement, I want the car to start rolling. I don't want it to hum. I don't want it to buzz. I don't want it to make any noise. I actually want the car to roll. I don't want it jumping, but I want that car to start moving. And that depends on the car. So like my two-wheel drive buggy, for example, might be at 10. My four-wheel drive buggy, because there's more drag, there's more things to be driven, it might be at 14. And that's variant on gearing, motor, drivetrain freeness. There's a lot of variables. But if that setting's not done right, you'll feel somewhat disconnected to the car. And the other complaint is pump. You guys won't feel like the car's got enough pump.
Okay, so your minimum
that's throttle, minimum throttle.
And that initial little pull.
I want that car to move.
Okay, so the higher that is, it's actually going to give it more energy.
Yes, because again, if I put that setting of 14 in a rock crawler, it's just going to flip over and snap.
Okay. A lot of people are under the perception that lower number is for a higher end equipment.
No, they're confusing it with the neutral width. Okay. And that's why I brought it up. Those two settings kind of go hand in hand. Minimum brake's the same way. In off-road, everyone pretty much runs the default, which is 3. And that's fine. And you can start playing with that. Like if you really like super, super strong brakes right when you get into the trigger, crank it up. And we have guys that are that way. They want that brake instantaneous, so you crank it up. Right, and so that's what I'm saying. And there's another setting for brake setting. So I'll just continue it out into the rest of the brake settings that we offer. Does everyone remember seeing active brake setting in their Tekin stuff?
Yeah. Active
brake is what we refer to as a brake adder. And so if you panic brake and you have active brake turned on, we'll give you even more brake force. If you roll into the brakes nice and controlled, we won't activate it. If you panic brake, the active brake will get engaged. We're going to stop the car right now. It's instantaneous. There's a lot of brake force. I turn it off, obviously, in off-road because I'm not that kind of a driver. But if, for example, I might have it off on my two-wheel drive buggy because I need smooth brakes. But in my short course, where I really need to snap the two-wheel drive short course nose down, I'll run active brake too. Because that way, the only time I panic slap it is when I'm in the air. I might push brake it into the corners like normal, but if I need to snap that front end down because the nose is raised, that's what active brake is awesome for. I can snap that trigger all the way to full brake, and it brings the brakes down right now. And then
your four-wheel.
In my two-wheel drive short course.
Oh, two-wheel drive.
So what's nice is the rest of my brake going around the track feels completely normal. But if I panic brake and slap it, the active brake will come on and it'll drop the nose in. So for two-wheel drive short course, that setting is awesome. It's one of the reasons why we developed it. Okay. There's some new software that we're testing right now, and I can go over that when we're not being recorded, that we're doing some other stuff. But basically, if you need help if you're not 100% happy with your brakes on a Tekin controller, or even if it's not Tekin, I can help you with that, because 9 times out of 10, the speed of default settings aren't necessarily ideal for every particular class. And so with our stuff, for example, every time I've ever given someone my brake profile, they always come back just shaking their head because they just picked up 2/10. The car is easier to drive. They're more confident with it because the brake settings are defaulted and they've never tried anything else. And obviously, it can get confusing really fast. And we give you a lot of adjustments. And the only reason why we have to do that is because we make one speedo that goes from a two-wheel drive buggy, four-wheel drive short course, two-wheel drive short course, a rock crawler, a rock racer. I mean, that one controller that could find its way with 15 genres of RC. So we have to be pretty vague with the default settings. More questions?
Speaking of going out for that custom settings, you can go, because there's a lot of new guys here that I've seen. Like custom settings in the Tekin software.
Okay, so on the Tekin stuff, for example, timing profiles. There's 5 default profiles and there's 2 custom profiles. You can change between the 5 default profiles as much as you want right on the fly without a computer. Just use the buttons. What's cool about the custom ones is you can then program your own custom timing profiles that you can then switch on the fly with without a computer. So 6 and 7 are those profiles. If I want, for example, I'm at a track that I'm getting used to this one, for example, I will have both those profiles loaded. So if I know, for example, like this, let's say the track, whatever reason, slippery this round, I can have someone hand me my car. I can change that timing profile to kind of mellow out the car, put the car back on the track, and I can do better that round without doing anything other than changing the profile. Because I might just turn down the current limiter in that profile, or I might have less boost in that profile. Or for example, start and end RPMs. If the track is slippery, I still want the fast car. I just don't want it to have the wheel speed down low. 9 times out of 10, I'll have higher start and end RPM to prevent the wheel spin on the bottom end. And that's how I'll change it on the profile. And I'll go from 6 to 7. And all that's doing in I know is going from, let's say, start 5,000 RPM, it's going to start 10. So I'm out of that corner fast. I'm past that corner. The car's got more time to settle. Now I can take that horsepower back. And that's all I'm doing with a custom profile. We also have custom throttle curves. You can adjust those too, but I personally don't use them. I can do it on my radio. That's all you're here to do. More questions?
So when you're talking about taking your start RPM for your timing, adding more speed on a slippery track, if you start higher, let's say 5,000 default, where you usually start at, but the track is slippery, so you start at 10. So when you move up to 10, what I've always been told is timing is wherever you start from here to this point is basically like stairs.
Correct.
So the shorter
you're 100% right.
The more your curve is going to be up. So if you raise the bottom end, do you need to raise the top end to stay as smooth as you were?
If you want the feel to stay the same, yes.
Okay.
And so what he's saying is, for example, the default start in RPMs on our Tekin is 5,000 start, 20,000 in, roughly. If the track is slippery, I might want to go to 10 and 25. So that the feel of the controller won't really change, the power delivery won't change. It just comes in later in the drive. What I mean by that is, let's say default-wise, my boost strip's coming in right at the corner apex, right when I want to pick up the throttle, boost strip's coming in. If that's too soon and that causes the tires to spin and the car to step out, I can raise that RPM, and so the next time I come around, I am 4 feet past that apex. The car's probably going straight now. I can handle the power. That's all the RPMs do. The wider that window is, the less steep that timing advances. So it comes in smoother. So like on four-wheel drive, for example, if we're on big tracks, I want to boost my 6.5, I'll have a really wide margin. I'll have a 10,000 start and a 40,000 end RPM because I want the extra power, but I just want it really, really smooth. If I want it punchier, I bring that end RPM down and leave my start. So that if you have a less gap, if it's 10 start and 15 in, that's going to be a really aggressive time.
20 degrees.
And 5,000 RPMs. And to give you an idea, on this particular layout, on any given corner, your car's not ever slowing down lower than probably 2,500 RPM. Just so everyone so you understand that. Even around the 180, your car's still rolling around that 180, 100, at 2,500 RPMs or more. So your car, everyone sometimes, oh, I'm only going like a 50 RPMs. No, you're not. When your car's rolling next to you while you walk next to it, that's about 2,000 RPMs. You'd be surprised at how fast that boost comes in at 5,000 default. It's pretty quick. You're talking inches off that apex. So that's why raising that sometimes is nice if, to control wheel spin, especially in like two-wheel buggy. Where we want to get out of that corner nice and smooth. I want the speed, I want the power, but I want the car to go straight. Yeah, it's kind of easy to go add the power when the car is already straight. So that's kind of a nice feature to it. That's why we have those adjustments for that. So, any more questions? Let's see if anybody's asking questions online. No, we got nothing. So we'll go ahead and end this.